Okay, I thought, first of all, thank you very much for coming tonight. I really appreciate everybody who's taken the time out from their busy schedule, particularly with an election campaign, to come out and support me tonight. So it's a tremendous honor for me to sort of publish my first book, and so thank you very much for coming out. What I thought I would do tonight, I thought I would read you a very short excerpt from the book. I don't want to really bore you too much because you'll read it yourself. But I thought I'd read a short excerpt and then take it open. We'll take some questions. Before I start, a couple of people I really want to thank. I really want to thank my partner Andrew, who's really supported me through this presentation. Thank you very much. And I really want to thank Terry Glavin, who was flown in for this from Victoria, my editor, who was an inspiration and did an amazing job working with me in this project. Thank you very much. Now, there's a lot of material in this book, and it was very, it's a hard choice to decide what will I read tonight, what will I talk about, because the book is a journey. I wrote this book because I had lost friends over the years. In fact, you'll read in the front of the book, I lost a musical friend last year who was very upset over the fact that I was critical of Barack Obama. And he couldn't fathom how a gay person could be somewhat supportive of Stephen Harper. And so he said, he sent me an email. He said, let's totally part company. Let's not speak to each other ever again. And so I decided that, that was one of the reasons I had to write this book as an answer to those people, to let them know what I saw after 9/11 in particular, what I saw happening in Canada. If you remember back after 9/11, there was the Intifada, the war in Iraq, and George Bush, and there was more George Bush derangement syndrome, and Michael Moore coming on the scene. So I had to write about all of this to explain, my feelings and how I drifted over time to join the Conservative Party. But this book is a lot more than just that journey. I have 2 chapters in this book on gay politics that turns everything you know, or everything you thought you knew, completely on its head. There's a chapter on Islam that explores a very, very nasty underbelly in the conservative movement. And you actually saw some of that in play with the debate over the refugees. That chapter will make some conservatives a little uncomfortable. And then there's the story, the inside story of Iranian, the film that I showed in 2011 that the Iranian embassy tried to stop. And for that chapter, I actually, through ATIP, Access to Information, I got 1,000 pages of documents from the Library Archives and the Ministry of National Heritage. I went through 1,000 pages to put together a firm timeline of what people were saying within the archives as they were acceding to Iranian demands to cancel my film, and the lies they told after the fact to hide what they were doing with the Iranian embassy. So it's all there in detail. Now, tonight, this book skewers the left, the postmodern left, and it's going to make some conservatives uncomfortable as well. So I thought, because a lot of people here are conservative, that I would actually do something, read something that might make you squirm a little bit. And so bear with me as I go through this. And this part is from the postscript. So it's after I've finished telling the story about my life. I was always the skeptical one. At Passover Seder, when the door was open to welcome the angel Elijah, I wanted to know if he really drank some wine from the cup left on the table for him. So one year, I must have been 8 or 9, I decided to put some tape on the glass and see if the wine went down when the door was open to welcome him. Everybody at the table seemed somewhat alarmed, and there were attempts to divert my attention while they moved the tape. I thought it was a great scientific experiment. I was puzzled that no one else at the table shared my enthusiasm. Being Montrealers, Passover was a time when my Jewish religion clashed a bit with my Montreal Canadians' religion. The Stanley Cup final would often coincide with Passover, so there was no way we could watch the game. The compromise was to keep the TV on in my grandparents' den, run in every now and then and whisper the latest score around the table while my grandfather concluded the service. As I look back to where I've been and where I am now, what I find striking that I really haven't changed all that much. My socialism, back in the 1980s, made me passionate about the need to topple dictators and to liberate people around the world. I'm no longer a socialist. I've done pretty well for myself as a capitalist. But I still strongly believe that freedom, liberty, and democracy are universal values that all people will ultimately want. To be honest, I never would have dreamed that one day I'd end up joining a conservative political party. And when I look back, maybe I've become accustomed to the contradictions just by growing up Jewish in Montreal in the 1960s. At that time, the schools were divided into the Protestant and Catholic school systems, and all the Jews went to the Protestant schools. So until I was in grade 7, we started the day with a half-hour Bible study. We sang O Canada and God Save the Queen, then we said the Lord's Prayer. Sometimes we recited the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And every day we sang 2 hymns from the Protestant hymn book. If you could picture me as a 10-year-old Jewish kid singing Onward Jewish Soldiers, then maybe it would be easier to picture me in the 1980s as a Bay Street investment analyst by day and an organizer for the movement against Canada's involvement in the U.S. cruise missile program by night. That might help explain, too, why it was possible for me to join the Conservative Party. I became a conservative without abandoning the Jewish and progressive values I grew up with. The importance of alleviating poverty, caring for people, and fighting for equality and against discrimination. And I made many good friends in the Conservative Party. I worked for some mighty fine candidates. And there's one candidate here, Keith Fountain, who's here. Great candidate in 2006. He's in chapter 3. Great candidate. Unfortunately, by the time I sat down to write this book, the Conservative Party had come to feel like an ideological straitjacket. The Conservative Party had become more concerned with the Conservative Party than with ordinary people. I'll probably let my party membership lapse. To be fair, the Harper Conservatives proved to be fairly competent, and they did several important things. Tax-free savings accounts, ultimately balancing the budget after the deficits from the 2009 recession, reforming immigration and refugee policy, cold shoulder to oil company takeovers by Chinese state-owned enterprises, and the signing of several free trade agreements. But there are a host of problems that need government action, attention, and the Conservatives ended up seeming mostly absent. Take the issue of the CBC. While the Conservatives have cut the budget of the CBC by around 10%, they have refused to set any strategic direction for the broadcaster. Some of my Conservative friends have strenuously argued that the CBC should be privatized, but that's not my view. I believe the CBC should operate like PBS in the United States and be supported mostly by its viewers and listeners. But the whole debate is academic, since the Conservatives won't take any bold steps to change the CBC. They'll just let it list with the wind. You'd think the Conservatives really cared about the military, but that isn't true at all. While NATO has set a goal of 2% of GDP for defense spending, Canada was down to less than 1% during the Conservatives' final years. According to historian Jack Ranstein, that's the lowest since the 1930s. Australia was spending $30 billion a year while we were spending $20. And military procurement was in huge trouble. The F-35 purchase was completely mishandled, and we have not yet started to build the ships we need. In fact, the new icebreaker will only enter service in 2022. More than $10 billion was returned to the Treasury because it just couldn't be spent. Other files just languish. Even files that are conservative in nature are ignored. You'd think the Conservatives would get rid of supply management. But it was a liberal, Martha Hall Finley, who actually made the first serious proposals for change. And there were many other issues they ignored. They wouldn't simplify our taxes and eliminate corporate welfare. They wouldn't fix the broken family law system and end blatant discrimination against fathers. They seemed unable to sign any new treaties with Aboriginal people or make any headway on the deeply dysfunctional Aboriginal affairs file. They let the Senate dangle and the House of Commons sink further into irrelevance. Private experimentation in healthcare was out. They couldn't care less about the shape of Canada's capital city. Equalization couldn't be mentioned. Bilingualism was off limits. And any discussion moving back towards the merit principle in hiring couldn't be discussed. The Harper government is actually quite timid. One might even say arrogantly timid. Internationally, they become very vocal about supporting Israel and Ukraine. They would denounce Putin any day of the week. But in the end, they know they don't have to do much. It's nice to see the Harper government send 200 troops to help train Ukrainian forces, but surely we can do better than that. Even our contributions to the coalition against ISIS was somewhat tepid. 6 CF-18s, 1 tanker, 1 surveillance plane, and 69 special forces. Tiny New Zealand sent 140 special forces to fight. The Netherlands and Belgium each sent 6 F-16s. Harper's Canada spoke loudly and carried a twig. We should be thankful, however, that our conservatives are very different from American conservatives, though. And I'm going to end there, because there's a lot more to read. That chapter, again, the next part of that chapter goes into the left, so it's not that I leave it at criticizing the Harper conservatives, but I just wanted to give you a taste of what's in the book. I'd like to open it up for questions. And I'm sure you probably have lots of questions, and maybe I'll take any questions.